Dr. Kaia Okafor had always found it ironic that she spent her days helping people connect while actively avoiding human contact herself. The neural enhancement bay of the Meridian's edge was her sanctuary, a sterile, chrome-plated bubble where emotions could be quantified, packaged, and sold like any other luxury commodity. Which, let's be honest, was exactly what they were on this floating palace of corporate-sponsored self-discovery. "Next patient, please," she muttered into her headset, watching the biometric readouts dance across her retinal display. Another day, another rich colonist seeking to purchase enlightenment at 30,000 credits per session. Junlu entered with the careful movements of someone carrying invisible weight. Mid-30s, designer griefwear in muted grays, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and felt even more. The passenger manifest listed him as a terraforming engineer heading to Kepler for 42B, but Kaia could read the real story in his cortisol levels and the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. "So," Kaia said, settling into her ergonomic throne of technological superiority, "what particular flavor of emotional tourism are we serving today?" The brochure mentions our premium empathy mapping experience. Apparently it's very popular with passengers who want to, quote, truly understand the hearts of others. She couldn't quite keep the sarcasm out of her voice. 3 years of helping wealthy travelers play with their brain chemistry had that effect. Jin's smile was paper-thin. "My daughter died in a terraforming accident 6 months ago. The therapists on Earth said I have something called empathy deficit disorder. That I can't connect anymore. Can't feel what others feel." He paused, staring at the neural interface crown hanging from the ceiling like a chrome spider. "They said this might help, right? Of course it was dead kid trauma. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. The empathy parasites we use are completely safe," Kaia explained, her clinical mask sliding into place. "Biosynthetic organisms designed to temporarily bridge neural pathways between subjects. They map emotional responses, create temporary synaptic connections that allow you to literally experience someone else's feelings. Most clients find it illuminating." What she didn't mention was that the parasites were the result of 15 years of corporate research into manufacturing authentic human experiences. Nurex Corporation had spent billions developing organisms that could commodify the one thing money supposedly couldn't buy: genuine emotional connection. The fact that they looked like microscopic jellyfish crossed with fiber optic cables was just an aesthetic bonus. "How does it work?" Jin asked, his engineer's mind clearly needing the technical details to feel safe. "Simple, really. We introduce a controlled population of the parasites into your bloodstream through a neural port." Kaia gestured to the crown-like device. "They migrate to your emotional processing centers and create temporary pathways. Then we pair you with another participant, someone chosen for emotional compatibility, and you experience each other's feelings in real time. Duration is typically 2 hours. And the other person? Random selection from our participant pool. Could be anyone on the ship who's signed up for the mutual empathy experience." Kaia pulled up the day's roster on her display. "Looks like we have a Ms. Rivera, aged 47, recently divorced, traveling to start fresh in the outer colonies. Her emotional profile suggests she's dealing with liberation anxiety mixed with profound loneliness. Should be a good match for your grief processing." Jin nodded slowly. "What are the risks?" "Minimal. Some participants report temporary emotional bleed-through for a few hours post-session. Occasional identity confusion if the experience is particularly intense. Standard corporate liability waivers apply. Naturally." What Kaia didn't mention, because the corporate briefings had been very clear about not mentioning it, was that the latest batch of parasites had been acting unusual. Nothing dramatic, just small behavioral anomalies that the Nurex techs insisted were within normal parameters. Parasites lingering slightly longer in neural tissue, forming unexpected connection patterns, creating networks where none should exist. But the profit margins were too good to pause operations over a few statistical outliers. "All right," Shin said. "Let's do it." Kaia activated the neural crown, watching as the delicate tendrils descended to make contact with Zhen's skull. The parasites were already prepared. A swirling suspension of microscopic life forms in biocompatible fluid, each one carrying engineered genetic sequences that would hopefully create the emotional bridge he was paying for. "You'll feel a slight tingling as they establish connection," she said, monitoring his vitals as the parasites entered his bloodstream through the neural port. "Then a gradual sense of expansion. Like your emotional range is suddenly wider than normal." Jun's pupils dilated as the parasites reached his amygdala. His breathing deepened and Kaia could see his cortisol levels beginning to shift on her display. "That's different," he murmured. "How so?" "I can feel something. Like there's someone else in here with me. But not threatening. More like..." He paused, searching for words. "Like being alone in a house and suddenly realizing you're not alone, but instead of being scared, you're relieved." Kaia frowned at her readouts. The parasites were establishing connections faster than usual, and the neural pathway formation looked more complex than the standard emotional bridge patterns. Instead of simple point-to-point links, she was seeing web-like structures forming throughout Jun's limbic system. "Dr. Okafor?" Jun's voice had changed, softer, more uncertain. "I think something's wrong." "Define wrong." "I can feel her." "Ms. Rivera." "But she's not in the session yet, is she?" She's in her cabin looking out at the stars and thinking about her ex-husband. She's wondering if she made a mistake leaving Earth." Jun's eyes widened. "How am I feeling her emotions from across the ship?" Kaia's hands flew across her control interface, pulling up ship-wide neural activity scans. What she saw made her stomach drop like a malfunctioning gravity generator. The parasites weren't just in Jin anymore. They were in the ship's bioneural network, the organic computing system that managed everything from life support to navigation. And they were spreading. Jin? I need you to stay very calm and not move while I figure out what's happening." "Dr. Okafor," he said, and now his voice carried harmonics that definitely hadn't been there before. "I don't think we're dealing with a malfunction." On her display, she could see parasite populations throughout the ship beginning to synchronize their activity patterns. Passengers in their cabins were showing elevated neural activity. The ship's bioneural cores were processing emotional data alongside navigational calculations. "I think," Jin continued, his eyes now reflecting depths that seemed far too vast for one human consciousness, "they're evolving." Captain Torres arrived in the neural enhancement bay with the brisk efficiency of someone who dealt with more than her share of passenger-related crises. Unfortunately, Kaia suspected this particular crisis was going to make drunk passenger Start's fight in the casino look quaint by comparison. "Status report," Dr. Torres said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from 20 years of keeping fragile human beings alive in the hostile emptiness between stars. "Remember how corporate assured us the parasites were completely contained and couldn't possibly interact with ship systems?" Kaia gestured at her displays, which were now showing a neural network map that looked less like a medical readout and more like a living constellation. "Well, they lied. Or were spectacularly wrong. Either way, we have a problem." Jin was still connected to the neural crown, but his consciousness seemed to be distributed. His vital signs were stable, but his brain activity was synchronized with patterns throughout the ship in ways that should have been biologically impossible. "The parasites have integrated with our bioneural cores," Kaia continued. "They're using the ship's organic computing network to create connections between passengers. Not just empathy mapping, full emotional and memory sharing. And the weird part? Nobody seems distressed about it." Torres pulled up the ship-wide monitoring system on her wrist display. Passenger biometrics showed elevated neural activity across all decks, but stress indicators were actually decreasing. Heart rates were calm. Anxiety levels were dropping to near zero. "Ms. Rivera is in her cabin," Jin said suddenly, his voice carrying that strange harmonic quality, "but she's also here with me. She can feel my grief, and I can feel her loneliness, but something amazing is happening. The feelings aren't just mixing, they're resolving. Like mathematical equations finding their solutions." "That's not how emotions work," Kaia said. "Isn't it?" Jun's eyes focused on her with uncomfortable intensity. "What if we've been thinking about consciousness all wrong? What if individual awareness is just the default setting? What if these parasites aren't creating artificial connections? What if they're revealing connections that were always there?" Captain Torres stepped closer to the neural crown controls. "Can we disconnect him?" "I've been trying. The parasites have integrated too deeply into his neural pathways. Forcible disconnection could cause permanent brain damage." Kaia pulled up more displays, each showing increasingly complex patterns of activity throughout the ship. "But Captain, look at this. The ship's navigation systems are operating 20% more efficiently. Environmental controls have optimized for passenger comfort in ways our algorithms never managed. It's like the ship is thinking better." Through the enhancement bay's viewports, they could see other passengers in the corridor. They were walking differently, moving with a kind of synchronized flow, like dancers who'd practiced together for years. Their faces showed an expression Kaia had never seen before. Complete, serene understanding. Dr. Okafor, Jin said, I know what you're thinking. You're afraid we're losing our individuality, becoming some kind of hive mind. But it's not like that. I'm still me. Ms. Rivera is still herself. We're just more connected to the truth of what we are. And what are we exactly? Torres asked. Isolated fragments of something larger that got convinced we were separate. Jean's smile was peaceful in a way that made Kaia's skin crawl. The parasites aren't changing us. They're showing us what we actually are underneath all the barriers we've built. Kaia's comm system chimed with an incoming message from Nurex corporate headquarters. She accepted the connection, and the familiar face of Executive Director Walsh appeared on her screen, looking predictably corporate and concerned. Dr. Okafor, we're receiving some unusual telemetry from your ship. Our models suggest the parasites may have exceeded expected parameters. You could say that, Kaia replied. They've created a ship-wide neural network and our passengers are experiencing collective consciousness. Any helpful suggestions from corporate? Walsh's expression went carefully neutral. This is actually within the range of outcomes we've been monitoring. The parasites were designed with adaptive evolution capabilities. What you're seeing may represent the next phase of human consciousness development. You knew this could happen? Torres stepped into the camera's view, her captain's authority radiating even through a video link. You deployed experimental consciousness-altering organisms on a passenger vessel without full disclosure? Captain, please understand. The potential benefits are extraordinary. Imagine a humanity without loneliness, without the barriers that prevent true understanding between people. No more wars based on inability to comprehend other perspectives. No more isolation, depression, or emotional suffering caused by disconnection. And no more individual privacy, autonomy, or personal boundaries, Kaia shot back. Those concepts may be evolutionary dead ends, Walsh replied. The passengers on your ship are the first humans to experience true emotional evolution. They're pioneers. Jun laughed, a sound that somehow contained echoes of other voices. Dr. Okafor, may I show you something? Before she could object, Jin reached out and touched her hand. The contact sent a jolt through her nervous system and suddenly she could feel everything. Ms. Rivera's bittersweet relief at leaving her old life behind. The quiet contentment of passengers who'd found unexpected friendship through shared consciousness. The vast, patient intelligence of the parasites themselves, ancient organisms that had waited millions of years for a species capable of true symbiosis. And underneath it all, the profound loneliness that had driven Kaia to specialize in connection technologies while avoiding actual human connection herself. We're not losing ourselves, Jin said gently. We're finding ourselves in each other. Kaia jerked her hand away, breaking the connection. Her heart was racing, but not from fear, from recognition. For those brief moments, she had felt truly understood in a way she'd never experienced before. The choice is yours, Walsh said from the screen. You can attempt to reverse the process, though our simulations suggest that would cause significant psychological trauma to the affected passengers. Or you can allow the evolution to continue and document humanity's first step into post-individual consciousness. Captain Torres looked at her crew roster. 237 passengers and crew, all showing signs of neural integration. All displaying unprecedented levels of emotional well-being and cooperative behavior. What happens when we reach the colonies? Torres asked. The parasites will spread, Jin said simply. Not through force or infection, but through choice. People will see what we've become and decide for themselves whether connection is preferable to isolation. Kaia stared at her displays, watching the beautiful, complex patterns of shared consciousness flowing through the ship. It was everything she'd spent her career trying to create: genuine human connection, authentic emotional understanding, the end of loneliness itself. It was also the end of privacy, individual thought, and the messy, chaotic, gloriously imperfect experience of being alone inside your own head. I can feel your conflict, Jin said. Would you like to experience it from our perspective? Kaia looked at Captain Torres, who was studying the passenger biometrics with the expression of someone calculating acceptable losses. If I refuse? Kaia asked. Then you refuse. The choice to connect must be freely made, or it's not connection at all. For the first time in 3 years of neural enhancement work, Dr. Kaia Okafor was faced with a treatment she might actually want for herself. The parasites waited patiently in their bio-neural networks, ready to bridge the gap between isolation and understanding, between the loneliness of individual consciousness and the vast, complex beauty of shared experience. The choice, as always, was hers to make.